Hello and welcome to the panel discussion organized by SETA Foundation, which is dedicated to the launch of SETA's recent publication called SETA Security Radar, covering the events of 2022 and also featuring the analysts' analysis and forecast for the 2023. To discuss this, I have very distinguished colleagues with me. This is Bilgehan Öztürk from SETA Foundation. This is the foreign policy researcher. And I have Valeria Giannotta from CeSPI, the prominent Rome-based think tank in Italy. Valeria Giannotta is the scientific director of the Observatory on Türkiye at CeSPI. And also we have Sami Hamdi, who is the editor-in-chief of the International Interest. And lastly, we have Dr. Murat Aslan, who is also a researcher at SETA Foundation, but at the same time, an assistant professor at Hasan Kalyoncu University in Gaziantep, Türkiye. Thank you very much, all dear colleagues. Before giving the floor to the distinguished speakers, I will briefly talk about the Security Radar 2023 publication. It is a publication, a special issue of SETA Foundation, which we publish every new year by taking the stock of the events of the previous year, which are shaping Turkey's geopolitical landscape, taking into consideration the main dynamics, it's shaping its foreign policy and security, and at the same time, we provide our forecasts on all these dynamics for the next year. So in this special issue for 2023, all analysts of this special edition and special issue analyze the main dynamics in each policy area for the 2022, and at the same time they analyzed how these dynamics might evolve in 2023. And we made a selection of topics when it comes to analyzing the dynamics and topics that are shaping Turkey's foreign policy and geopolitical landscape. These are mainly Turkish-American relations, Turkey-European Union relations, Turkish-Russian relations within the framework of the war in Ukraine. Obviously, Syria as a serious geopolitical and security issue for Turkey. Obviously, Eastern Mediterranean is another area of interest and concern for Turkey's strategic interests, but also its national interests. And also Turkey-Africa relations, in line with Turkey's growing activism in the continent. And apart from the spatial distribution of these topics, there are also thematic topics like defense industry, Turkey's defense policy and defense strategy, but at the same time an ongoing and far-reaching area such as counterterrorism, which is an ongoing issue for Turkey for many reasons, because of the risks emanating, especially from its southern borders. Unfortunately, because of the time limitations and also the limitations on the number of available speakers for such a session, we will only selectively cover three of these topics. Namely, we will delve into Turkey-Europe relations, also Turkey-Middle East and Turkey-Gulf relations, but at the same time the Eastern Mediterranean issue within the framework of Turkey's foreign policy and security. So apart from, of course, there are a lot of issues which are important, which are significant in terms of shaping Turkey's geopolitical environments. It is not that other issues are not important, but these are the issues in this publication that they are the most consequential and they are the most significant dynamics when it comes to shaping Turkey's security and foreign policy interests. So with this note, without taking too much of the time from speakers, I would like to give the floor first to Ms. Valeria Giannotta. Again, as I stated in the introduction, She is the scientific director of the Observatory on Turkey at CeSPI, a Rome-based leading Italian think tank. And Valeria will kindly analyze the most important dynamics for Turkey-European relations, taking into consideration the most important developments in 2022, and she will also make some forecast for 2023. Valeria, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Bilgehan, for the introduction and for the invitation, and thank you to SETA Foundation. And before starting, I really would like to congratulate you on this amazing publication, which is I printed out and it's here with me in Italy, which I believe is very timely and it gives exactly detail on what happened in this very interesting year that was 2022. And I mean, it makes some remarks on what we needed to expect for 2023. Basically, when it comes the relations between Turkey and Europe, my mind goes directly to the relations with the European Union. Of course, when we speak about European Union, our mind goes directly to the relations with the EU related to the negotiation process, which is still on the table between Ankara and Brussels. And unfortunately, also in 2022, nothing has been said and nothing new has been done. This I believe because the negotiation process, which is started in 2005, actually it has started with some genetic defects, I will say. That was a different European Union and it was a totally different Turkey, a Turkey that at that time did not experience so many crises and so many regional crises as well. But as soon as the negotiation process started in 2005, as we witnessed, many problems arose. And the main problems, which is still on the table, is related to the Cyprus issue. And the Cyprus issue is just blocking the majority of the chapters of negotiation process. Basically, starting from 2005 until today, formally, we did not see an improvement because still the Cyprus issue is a pending issue, which is going to, I would say, aggravate the situation also in the region and the Eastern Mediterranean. Besides the negotiation process, in 2022, we witnessed the crucial and critical role of Turkey in Europe. If we consider that Ukraine is a territory very close and within Europe. And when in February the war erupted, it was visible to all of us the crucial role of Ankara. Ankara, which adopted a sort of balancing role in defending the national interest of Turkey, but also trying to find a solution in this very unfortunate conflict that still is going on. And I would say that Turkey made the difference. If we look at the approach that some European countries, if not all European countries, by considering the countries within European Union has adopted, that was just sanctioning Russia and adopting a very pro-Ukraine stance. On the other side, Ankara trying to defend the national interest of Turkey, of the country, and thanks to the personal contact of President Erdogan, has tried also to mediate or to find a way for mediating between the two warring parts, which are Russia and Ukraine. We shouldn't neglect the fact that Turkey did not apply the sanctions that all the European countries have applied. Turkey, on the other side, tried very hard to put the conflict sides together. We shouldn't neglect the first effort that was taken at margin of Antalya Diplomatic Forum last year in March, And then again, the roundtable of negotiation attempt that was taken in Istanbul. And then again, lately in July, I would say, amazing effort that put the basis of the grain corridor, that it was one of the brilliant action and diplomatic action, and the main architect was Ankara, was Turkey. And this brilliant action has been acknowledged at international level by the UN, to the extent that also in Istanbul, the UN headquarters for coping with the food crisis has been opened. So basically, I will say that despite the fact that Turkey diverged a bit by the European stances related to this conflict, from a sort of, I will say, hypocritical point of view, the European countries acknowledge the great role of Turkey. Why? Because Turkey has been the only, I would say, the only actor within the international arena that did something. And we know that in any diplomatic game, in order to be efficient, in order to provide some solid and valid solution, or at least to try to provide a valid solution, we need to mediate. We need to talk at least to both parties. While on the other side, European Union has just taken the side of Ukraine by closing the door to Russia. And of course, this kind of unilateral approach eventually will not give so many fruits. On the other hand, we have witnessed the European countries knocking at the door of Ankara when it comes to the issue of energy, because it's in front of our eyes. Actually, we're also experiencing here in Italy the huge crisis that we had related to the energy supplies, because many of the European countries are dependent by Russia and by Russia supplies. So I can speak clearly about my country, which is Italy, and as soon as the crisis started, our decision maker made a sort of energy tour by knocking at the doors of the main countries who could provide energy and energy supplies, and the Gulf countries, the North African countries, in the Caucasus, in order to diversify our energy supplies. And of course, it came in this very dynamic and in this very critical mosaic, I will say, it arose the role of Turkey as a sort of energy hub, because we shouldn't neglect that Ankara, by expressing a very long vision, I mean, by looking at the future since a long time, actually has opted for diversifying the energy supply. We shouldn't neglect that across Turkey are passing the several and different pipelines, the Turk Stream, convoying the gas directly from Russia under the Black Sea through Turkey, and then the TANAP, which is convoying the gas from the Caucasus, from the Azerbaijan, crossing through Turkey and then to Greece, and eventually is going to be connected to TAP, which is the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, which will end up in Italy as well. And then some other pipelines taking the gas from the Middle East. So the so-called Southeastern corridor, and in the Southeast corridor, Turkey has been playing a critical, I would say vital role, is becoming a key element in the diversification of gas supply to Europe. And we have seen that we have recorded actually many diplomatic visits from European countries to Turkey in order to discuss the energy issue. And contemporary also, the so-called East Med project was left aside, I would say. And moreover, when it comes to the relations with Europe and European Union, in 2022, we have witnessed a new experiment, the so-called European Political Community, which was a sort of a platform created and much wanted by the French President Macron, that it held his first meeting in Prague, and beside the European Union countries has also involved some other countries, like the so-called third countries, including Turkey, but some other regional countries whose importance is of a great whose role also is of great importance. This European political community, I will say that it was an experiment in order to put together all the key elements, the key actors, and in the region. And when I speak about the region, I speak about enlarged Europe, so the region and also the bordering countries and the bordering regions, in order to strengthening the dialogue between these key actors. And I would say that the first experiment went quite well, and eventually in the next future we can see an increasing role of this platform. And also in Prague, it was very clear the important role played by Turkey. Turkey has, as a country who is already in the list for becoming one day, hopefully, full member of European Union, so in the accession process. But Turkey that has already established very important connections and complementarities with Europe and European Union. I already spoken about the energy issues, but it comes to my mind also the refugees issue. And we shouldn't forget that already in 2016, the so-called refugees agreement, refugee statement has been signed between European Union and Turkey. And of course, it's clear the great effort and the achievement of Ankara in welcoming so many Syrian refugees. That nowadays are around 5 million, if I'm not wrong, and the great hospitality of the Turkish people as well. On the other side, along the years, we have been unfortunately witness a sort of fatigue by the European Union to accommodate the refugees, but also to accommodate the requests of Turkey. When it came to financial support, there was a sort of a mutual frustration between the two parts, between Ankara and Brussels, for example, but also this frustration was generated by the fact that European Union did not keep some promises that they were already included in the refugee deals, and they are still pending nowadays in 2023. And I refer namely to the liberalization of a visa for Turkish people towards the Schengen area, which was part of the deal. And despite the fact that Ankara fulfilled some of the benchmark, these criteria is still pending, and nowadays you as a Turkish people, you need still to wait and make long line in front of European consulate. And as far as I know, the situation is getting worse and worse. Because they are just rejecting many applications and sometimes baseless. And also another criteria that is not being fulfilled is a modernization of the custom union between Turkey and European Union. So those criteria are still on the table nowadays. Have you already spoken about European membership? That was, again, another issue that was included in the refugees agreement. Because, I mean, in front of the great effort of Turkey, European Union should have facilitated, evaluated, and make it easier the accession process of Ankara towards European Union, but nothing has been recorded so far, and we are in 2023. I will say that when we look at the relations between Turkey and Europe, and considering Europe as European Union, for the next future, we should expect a sort of sectorial collaboration, sectorial cooperation. It means that cooperation in some specific areas. We already recorded this when it came to the refugees issues. Eventually, we will record more efforts and more diplomatic visits and more diplomatic achievement on the energy issues as well. But I think there are margins to believe that also some new achievement will be recorded at the level of the defense industry. And I will cut short. Because already we have seen that Turkey is investing a lot in the defense industry, and already we have seen that the drone Bayraktar has made the difference in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And already, Turkey is selling abroad the drones. I mean, it's selling in the region, but also to some countries within European Union, and if I'm not wrong, to Poland, which is also member of NATO. And there are some information, but still we need to verify that at margin of G20 in Bali, also the Italian government started the negotiations in order to purchase the drones from Turkey, and this can make the difference. So I do believe that what we need to focus more in this year, in the next future, it will be the energy card and the defense procurement, that it will be the real connector between Turkey and Europe. And I think I spoke too much, so I will leave the floor to the other speakers. And in case you have some other question, I will be very happy to reply. Thank you.
We will have. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very thorough intervention. You raised very important points, such as the state of Turkey-EU relations. There is no improvements. There is no visible improvements in the accession process. It is important to remember that since 2005, both European Union and Turkey, have changed a lot. It's important to remember the Ukraine crisis, the Ukraine war's impact on the relations between Turkey and the European Union. Of course, one of the greatest achievements by Turkey was the Great Deal, and also the role of Turkey, the potential role of Turkey when it comes to the energy crisis. The European political community was another important development in 2022, and probably will have importance in this year too. And you mentioned also the areas, refugee issue, and also it was important to remember that the European Union side of the bargain in refugee agreement between Turkey and the European Union were not honored to the full extent. It was also important to remember this. And lastly, you mentioned you actually shared your forecast how Turkey and EU countries might cooperate in the future. It will be basically based on some sectoral areas. These are all really important points. And thank you very much. Of course, we will have some questions. Now, with this, I will turn to the second speaker of this panel discussion, who is Sami Hamdi. As I said in the introduction, Sami Hamdi is an analyst, especially in foreign policy and security issues. He has a special focus on Middle East and Gulf. I will kindly ask Sami Hamdi to analyze the state of Turkey-Middle East relations, Turkey-Gulf relations, which have been dominated, especially in recent years, with the new moment of normalization or rapprochement between Turkey and certain Middle Eastern countries. And Sami, again, you will have 15 minutes to analyze this. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Bilgehan. Thank you to SETA for organizing this particular event, and it's a pleasure to share this platform with Valeria and with Murat as well. I think this issue is better understood by looking at it from the perspectives of the different parties, and in particular the different Gulf parties towards Turkey and towards the idea of normalization, or how they perceive their relations with Turkey, primarily because while the region has been dominated by two primary blocks over the past decade, the idea being Turkey and Qatar on one side and UAE, Saudi Arabia and Egypt on the other side, when it comes to the normalization, or when it comes to the reconciliations that are taking place, the reality is that they are being driven by individual interests as opposed to block interests. What we're seeing is a shifting in terms of the tectonic plates in the region, that is forcing individual Gulf states to embark on their own reconciliation processes, almost independent of one another. And I think the clearest example we can give of this is the reconciliation that took place with Qatar, whereby it was absolutely clear that the reconciliation was driven primarily by Saudi Arabia, almost unilaterally by Saudi Arabia, by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and that the reaction of the UAE, of Egypt and Bahrain was one of confusion as opposed to genuine support for the reconciliation with Qatar. And that's why we saw later on that there needed to be a visit from Emir Tamim to Egypt afterwards to try to shore up, and CeSPI, of course, to Doha as well to shore that up. And it's also why to this day there are still signs that suggest that the reconciliation is not entirely complete between Qatar and the UAE, with Qatari media and UAE media continuing to go after one another and criticize one another, and also the absence of the leaders from time to time from very important conferences hosted by each other. The point here being is that Saudi Arabia pursued a reconciliation based on its own interests, while the UAE was not necessarily particularly inclined to it. And the same applies to Turkey in terms of the dynamics that are driving the reconciliation with Turkey itself. I think first and foremost, from the Gulf perspective, the perception of Turkey at the moment, or in particular, the perception of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and it's important to make this particular distinction, primarily because the issue that many Gulf states had with Turkey, and the issues that many Gulf states still perhaps have with Turkey, is not necessarily that Turkey is now involved in many different areas across the region, but primarily because Recep Tayyip Erdogan himself, with his rhetoric, with his persona, his personality, resonates with the populations that many of the Gulf states wish to influence. In other words, Erdogan specifically, his influence, his rhetoric, his Islamic rhetoric, if you will, resonates with millions across the region. And this is why we see often that Erdogan is listed as one of the most influential Muslims in the world, or considered one of the most influential figures in the Muslim world. And this is the crux of the issue that has always been at the center of Turkey-Gulf relations, which is why I disagree fundamentally with many analysts who insist that it's uniquely political and economic. It's more than that. It's this idea that Turkey, that the fact that Erdogan won elections, that he won democratically, that he's a leader who espouses these sort of influences, that resonates deeply with millions across the Arab world, and that's the crux of the issue. The reason I mention that is when the Gulf states are now looking at Turkey, and we speak quite bluntly here, they believe that given the economic crisis that is taking place in Turkey, given the grey cloud that is over the elections and the prospects of the AK Party, the prospects of Erdogan, they believe that now is a prime time through which to actually reconcile with Turkey, because they will be able to come to some sort of terms through which Turkey itself will be able to make some form of concessions. With regards to Saudi Arabia, the concession was a simple one. It was to end the issue of Khashoggi once more and to accept the Saudi ruling on the issue of Khashoggi, which Turkey agreed, and bin Salman reciprocated by visiting Ankara and also investing in Turkey's economy. With the UAE, I think it was a bit more complex, and herein we see the differences in the dynamics between the Gulf, in that if you imagine you're an advisor who is sitting in Abu Dhabi, sitting with the UAE, and you notice that your primary ally, which is Saudi Arabia, has gone and unilaterally reconciled with Qatar. Part of the driving factor of the UAE reconciling with Turkey is that Turkey not only sees opportunities with Turkey in dealing with issues such as Syria, Libya, and the like, but it's also a part of calculating for the future, given the changes taking place in the region, given this rapprochement taking place between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And that's why we've seen recently that UAE Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed didn't go to the GCC Riyadh China summit in Riyadh, which was seen as a rebuke of Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman didn't go yesterday to the Abu Dhabi summit in what was seen as a rebuke as well to Abu Dhabi. So in the midst of these changing relationships, we see that Turkey now is being seen as an alternative option. Both Saudi Arabia and the UAE now envisage serious ties with Turkey in the midst of these changing tides that are taking place in the region. And I think that on the Syria issue, we're really seeing the impact of this reconciliation that is taking place, in that the UAE is trying to pitch to Turkey that it should be the place where President Erdogan and Assad of Syria should meet. The UAE is trying to liaise now with Turkey on issues related to Syria, issues relating to Libya, issues relating to Sudan. We saw Hakan Fidan, the head of the MIT in Sudan recently, meeting with Hemeti, who is considered to be associated with the UAE. In other words, we're seeing this rapprochement now starting to impact some of these issues that are taking place. But the reason I mentioned the dynamics is because while it's true that there are opportunities between Turkey and between the Gulf states, what's driving the reconciliations is uniquely this concern over how the tides are changing in the region and where the winds are going. It's about trying to adapt to a changing time in order to be able to protect each other's interests. And I think that this is why when we look at, for example, what's taking place in Libya and Turkey's bid to try to reconcile with Egypt, I think part of that is driven by this idea that, look, if we can reconcile with Saudi Arabia, if we can reconcile with the UAE, we can reconcile with Egypt as well. What's worth noting here is this, is that while Turkey has been chasing reconciliation and while Turkey has presented concessions to Saudi Arabia, such as the case of Khashoggi, it's important to note that Turkey has not given up even an inch of its foreign policy. Turkey has not given up an inch with regards to its interest in Libya. It hasn't given up an inch with regards to its interest in Syria. It hasn't given up an inch with regards to its interest in the Eastern Mediterranean, or in Mali, or in Somalia, or in Ethiopia, or in Central Asia, or in all of these various different arenas where it was competing with the Gulf states, suggesting that the dynamics of this reconciliation is not one of a victor over a defeated party, but rather, as Abdul Khaliq Abdullah put it, the UAE commentator, of two parties who no longer see any interest in wrestling with each other, that after 10 years of wrestling, they've come to this sort of situation whereby there is nothing much to wrestle about anymore. When we're looking at Libya now we're going towards a political process, a political dialogue that is as a result of Turkish intervention in Libya, almost entirely the result of Turkish intervention in Libya. If we're looking about the issue of the Muslim Brotherhood or the Arab Spring or the like, the Muslim Brotherhood have been resoundingly defeated in the region as a result of the UAE and Saudi Arabia and other dynamics that were at play. But the point here being is that the UAE no longer feels threatened by this Arab Spring phenomenon, that Turkey perhaps lent its support to these democratic transitions. The point here being is that the political points of contention are no longer as potent as they once were. And this has provided the framework or the groundwork through which these reconciliations have been able to take place. In terms of the future of these reconciliations, in terms of how, whether they can last, in terms of whether these are lasting reconciliations, I think there are 2 points worth noting. The first is that the Qatari-Saudi relationship is booming, it is thriving, it is blossoming. We've seen Qatari media now present more favorable coverage of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. We saw the Saudi Crown Prince go to Doha for the World Cup and very publicly and very visibly hold Emir Tamim, and they were holding each other, suggesting that this is a serious brotherhood. And if you're sitting in Abu Dhabi, where you believe that much of your ability to project your power is based on your relationship with Saudi Arabia, but the reason this suggests that the reconciliations are serious is that the UAE believes that if Qatar is going to go after Saudi Arabia, I'm going to go after Turkey. If Saudi is going to drift to Qatar, I will get Turkey to drift to me. In other words, it's these shifting tides that are suggesting that these reconciliations could last. And that's why we saw recently that Turkey has given Bayraktar drones to the UAE. UAE has decided to invest in Turkey. UAE and Turkey are liaising with one another when it comes to Syria. They're starting to talk to each other when it comes to Libya, because this reconciliation is being seen, at least from the UAE side, it's being seen as essential in adapting to the next 10 years of how the tides are changing in the region. And likewise with Saudi Arabia, when we saw that the only request that bin Salman had was that the Khashoggi case be set aside, it's clear that Saudi Arabia itself also envisages having access to Turkey's technical expertise. And we're seeing that Saudi Arabia, despite the past reservations that perhaps it's had over President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, we're seeing Saudi Arabia now lifting this unofficial boycott, more Gulf tourists now going to Turkey, more funding, more investment starting to go towards Turkey, in what's being seen as a genuine desire to close the chapter on the past and move towards a new chapter in these particular Gulf relations. This doesn't suggest that everybody is friends. This doesn't suggest that the parties like each other. It doesn't suggest that wrestling is not still taking place. What's happening instead is there is this consensus now that is emerging that in the midst of all this chaos, nobody is winning. In the midst of all this instability, nobody is winning. And in the midst of this environment where nobody is winning, there is this sort of a US power that is no longer a trusted ally. It's no longer a trusted ally of Turkey, no longer a trusted ally of the UAE or of Saudi Arabia or of Qatar. And therefore, there is this impetus that is taking place in the region, which is that we need to deal with our issues ourselves. We need to come up with a framework through which we can talk to one another and come to an agreement as to how this region should be run. And this is why we see in Libya that Turkey is driving efforts to unite the two governments of Bashar and of Dbeiba, being supported, of course, by the UAE in this initiative as well, and by Qatar as well. We're seeing what's emerging is that the parties have become tired of wrestling with one another, and as a result of the abandonment of the US allies, or the US ally, we're seeing now this consensus emerge of UAE, Turkey, Saudi, Qatar, all these other parties, and Egypt, saying to one another, look, we need to deal with these crises on our own terms. I think Turkey now has successfully managed to reconcile with Saudi Arabia, successfully managed to reconcile now with the UAE without compromising its relationship with Qatar. And I think all that's left now is for Turkey to try to convince Sisi to accept this reconciliation. Sisi, of course, who is deeply concerned by his own economic crisis, deeply concerned that Turkey is very powerful and influential in Libya. It is about trying to find a way to convince Sisi that he also has an interest in this new framework emerging between these powers, that there needs to be some form of communication, some form of cooperation in order to be able to deal with the issues of the region ourselves, as opposed to relying on Europe and the US to deal with it. And one point that's worth noting, and I know I'm running out of time, is this. Notice how even in the Ukraine war, there is a collective position from the UAE, Saudi, Turkey, and Qatar that they should support neither the US nor Russia, that they should adopt this third position where they are talking to Russia and also talking to the Ukrainians, where they are giving money and weapons to Ukraine, but also saying to Russia, come sit at the table and speak to Ukraine. In other words, there is a clear consensus. What Ukraine has shown is there is a clear consensus in the region, or between Turkey, UAE, and the like, that the US interests are not necessarily the interests of its allies in the region, and therefore there is this need to push for this third position whereby we look for stability that benefits us as well as the Ukrainians and the Russians and Europe and the US, that we're not a side party, that we are also a party with interest in and of ourselves. So to summarize essentially what the point is, it's not necessarily that suddenly the UAE likes President Erdogan and President Erdogan suddenly likes Mohammed bin Zayed. It's not about this sudden warmth that is emerging between the parties, but rather it is this tiredness from the wrestling, and it is this growing awareness and consensus that everybody is struggling from this wrestling. So maybe it's time to take a breather. It's time to take a pause. It's time to sit down with one another. It's time to talk, at least given that the issues of contention are no longer as potent as they once were. And the result of that talking is this reconciliation that we're seeing with the UAE, the selling of Bayraktars, the investment now going into Turkey, the return of Gulf tourists, the return of economic trade. We're seeing now the expansion of new ties. We're seeing now in Central Asia, UAE and Saudi Arabia also getting involved. In other words, we're seeing new doors of opportunities opening up. Whether this will last is questionable, but the point here is that the environment is certainly conducive to a lasting reconciliation. And to be honest, nations don't need to like each other to get along. They don't need to love each other to get along. What they need is to have a common interest, and the common interest in these reconciliations is stability, economic development, and prosperity. And it appears that these three now are the main goals of Turkey, UAE, Saudi, Qatar. That's what's facilitated this reconciliation, and it will have a significant impact on the current crises, whether that's in Libya, whether that's in Syria. And the final sentence is this: notice how in Syria, that this idea of reconciling or normalizing Assad or talking to Assad is an idea that the US is upset about, but an idea that all the regional parties are in agreement with, whether that's Oman, whether that's UAE, Saudi, Russia, Iran, all the like. In other words, the regional powers are coming together and saying, let's dictate how we think the region should be run without the US imposing. And I think this is the sign of the times. And to be honest, it makes an important change from a decade of strife, conflict, and wrestling.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sami. Again, a very insightful intervention. You raised very important points. by drawing attention to the individually driven nature of the reconciliation moment in the Middle East, how these countries used to behave in two rival blocs until recently. You also mentioned, how Erdogan's personality matters for the Gulf countries. It is the reconciliation and the reasons of friction in the past were more than political and economic. It was because of perceived influence of Erdogan among regular people of the region, and also it was also again a very up-to-date dynamic between United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia in terms of their bilateral rebuke of their respective interventions in the regions. And it was again very important, in my opinion, how Türkiye has not given up an inch on its national interests while reconciling with many of these actors and so on. So I will stop here, and we'll turn to our last speaker, Dr. Murat Aslan, and Dr. Murat Aslan will cover another important dynamic and area of interest and concern simultaneously for Turkey's security and foreign policy interests. Obviously, he will also cover Turkey-Greece relations and Libya's role in all these Eastern Mediterranean dynamics. So, Murat Aslan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bilgehan. First of all, I would like to thank you to draft and edit this wonderful piece of paper. And I contributed this book with my chapter on Eastern Mediterranean, which is based on developments and the projections for the future. On the other hand, I have to confess one thing. Well, we academics are usually behind the events. I mean, once something happens, we start to discuss it. On the other hand, when somebody pushes us to project something within the clear boundaries of predictions, well, it's really an art that most academics are a bit away, because the discussions of positivism, post-positivism, reflectionism, etc., well, it's a factor in here. On the other hand, as a former intelligence analyst of Turkish armed forces for many years, and now as an academic, there's a style. We first rely on the comments, that means the facts and figures on the ground, and later then we project in the form of assessments, as you may know. What I mean is that we search for indicators based on data we have gathered from the scene. Well, there's a risk in here. It's fashion. I mean, what is in the agenda of decision makers and also media or social media. And then you have to stick to trends at the global level. I mean, what's going on, for instance, nowadays, especially in the economy of the globe, or at regional level, that means Russia and Ukraine war, with a clear touch to global events. And in the meantime, bilateral relations like Turkish normalization with Israel and Egypt. And in the meantime, there are some internal events directly shaping exactly the policies, foreign policies of the countries, which is currently the elections, political elections, for instance, both in Greece and Turkey. In this sense, it's really hard to predict something because a lot of dynamics exist as an input. On the other hand, you have to be really selective not to be drawn in the events. And right after this introductory remarks, I believe we have to touch Eastern Mediterranean Sea as part of as a portion of my discussion in here. And now it's not the same as a year ago or 2 years ago or a decade ago, because nowadays East Med is not only about energy politics. It's not only about the strain between 2 or 3 countries, but it's something different. Now, Egypt and Israel started extracting natural resources over there. In the meantime, Israel started to export it, mainly to Jordan and to some extent to Egypt after liquefaction. As you know, they are marketing it to the global markets. And in the meantime, we have expectations, mainly in Egypt, that they can just surpass the current economic stalemate by means of this process. And if you go and just check the economic situation in the region, in parallel with the global trends, there's an escalation and resonation. And neither of the countries in the region is not an exception, but really a subject to a potential economic crisis. And in the meantime, we have an energy crisis, mainly felt in Europe. Well, it's the US benefiting most because they are more prone to export the liquefied natural gas other than the other energy resources. And Europe is in a clear search of reaching the resources with alternatives. What I mean is that Algeria, Caucasus, the Middle East, etc., or Norway. Well, another dynamic that we should focus on is the frozen conflicts or protracted conflicts in the region. Then we have to think about one magic word that could be adopted to the politics in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. It's the instability. I mean, even though there are countries over there with a stability right now as a pattern, well, instability seems to be a continuous mood that any of them would easily fall inside. And in here, if you just take the Eastern Mediterranean politics, the question then appears not only about the energy-related disputes or competition, but it's about territorial claims, it's about sovereignty concerns, and also security. In this sense, if you combine three of these facts, I mean, territorial rights, sovereignty, and also security concerns, then potential crisis does have a certain ground to pop up suddenly and affect the overall region. Well, if you just check this overall situation in the region, you may pick up as a method, you may pick up the countries and assess exactly the situation of them, and later then project what could happen in 2023. Well, if you start by countries, it's not that much difficult though. It's maybe in between conspiracy theory and also the reality on the ground, because we can't predict exactly if a social upheaval would erupt in Egypt, even though the conditions moderated for this. Once you argue that it may happen, well, then you can project. Then we should rely on, I believe, scenarios. What happens if this scenario A or B happens in this region? Well, personally, I believe that the most vulnerable issue in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea right now is Egypt, not Libya, not Lebanon, because there is a great economic recession. The debt level increased tremendously, and the vulnerability is not only about economy and also ideological divergence in the minds of the Egyptian society. On the other hand, if you visit Lebanon, the same conditions apply because economy is really bad, and social cohesion, as usual, has been one of the top issues that all Lebanons are concerned. Well, just visit Israel. It's a democracy, and they frequently repeat the elections over there. And in each time they repeat it, there's a sentiment or increase in the sentiments of, extreme right or left. So it's a question mark because it directly affects the foreign policy of Israeli government. Then. Well, Greece and Cyprus, it's an issue that I want to touch at the end of the discussion, though I have to, I believe, right now. Well, the competition with Turkey is a source of, reliability for their arguments for the Greeks and, Greek Cypriots. Because in each time there happens an escalation with Turkey, well, they can easily search for support in the halls of Europe or the United States, as we have witnessed in 2023. That means the issue of sovereign rights and also the claims based on territorial integrity has become the essential motivation for them. On the other hand, Turkish argument is the same as the Greeks and Greek Cypriots, because Turkey argues that it's the right of Turkey to claim territorial or sovereign rights in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. Then there's a sort of polarization that you can't mend easily. This is one fact. And such sort of reality injects external actors in the region. Well, you can easily see from which country the Greeks purchased a lot of weaponry as a pledge or at the expense of the Greek budget. Then you can see the profits of the third parties in the region. So it's another fact. So under these conditions, if you just check each country, including Libya, and I will touch it right now, there's a potential. For Libya, I believe, it's a country still in between the revolution. It was 2011, they started it, they achieved it, but they could not conclude it. This is one fact. In this picture, I believe, there must be a grave and encouraged, really brave transformation in Libyan thinking to achieve this revolution through the political process, not by means of military challenge to each other. Well, I don't want to talk about Khalifa Haftar over there because it's something known for all the audience, but still we have potential to witness a sort of conflict in Libya if the current political process do not achieve an election or a constitution. Yesterday night, as you may know, there was a sort of conflict in the Libyan International Airport between Halafi Salafis, Metali Salafis, sorry, and also 111th Brigade. That means once Libya is in our agenda, we must be prepared for all sorts of probabilities. Now, I want to touch especially Greek-Turkian relations after counting the headlines in the region. For the Greek-Turkish relations, what I believe is that it has remained as a rhetoric-based dispute last year. There was no friction between the militaries as we had witnessed in 2019, but it was rhetoric of the leaders that escalated the tension more. If you go and search the root causes of this, well, we had a great development on March 10th. It was the summit in Istanbul. Both leaders sat and discussed the problems, at least what to discuss on the table. But right after then, Mitsotakis went to the United States, addressed the US Congress, and violated one agreed title in the agenda. It was what? Not to bring the issues between two countries to third parties as if accusing or blaming the other. And that's why President Erdogan said, okay, Mitsotakis is non-existent for me, he said. But interestingly, there are some facts on the ground. Just prior to this visit to the United States, there were 30 violations in 72 hours above the Aegean Sea. I mean, it was Turkish aerospace violated by the Greeks 30 times in 72 hours. And second thing, there was an exercise, military exercise, Tiger Meat. And in this exercise, Greeks indirectly indicated Türkiye as a hostile nation, and Türkiye withdrew back from this exercise. And right after them, we witnessed another thing. It was the militarization of the islands. It was a continuous effort of the Greeks, though. There was something different right now. they started to locate, position the armored vehicles that was granted by the U.S. government. It's totally 1,200 M110 armored vehicles. And it's something new because it's the U.S. weaponry located on the islands that must be demilitarized in accordance with the international treaties like Lausanne or Paris Treaty of 1947, because the condition is very clear in here. It's what the islands will be demilitarized for the possession of these islands by the Greece. As you can see, the current events right now is in a way that has a potential to escalate in 2023. But the precondition in here is if certain actions, not rhetoric, is realized on the ground. What sort of actions? It may be a question. Well, it may be a military action directly challenging the other. It may be energy extraction in disputed areas. And another thing that's worth to review, it's Greek-Libya escalation. Why? Because Greeks are in a search of declaring 12 miles, either in Aegean Sea or around the Crete Island. It's a challenge for Turkey because of the, declaration of the Turkish Grand Assembly that it may be a reason of war. On the other hand, what I expect is that Greeks may challenge Libyans on the way to accept their agenda. And it's one thing really dangerous. Why? Because if Greeks start an escalation, not against Turkey, but also against Libya, it may also mean a probable cut in energy flow from Caucasus to Europe.
Okay.
So it depends on the actions of the Greek side to start an escalation or not. This is what I observe. Otherwise, it will remain calm, I believe.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Murat, Aslan, thank you. We'll have to leave it here. Since Valeria has to go, I will directly go into the Q&A session. I thank every speakers so far. I will start with you, Valeria. There are a couple of questions for you. How likely, in your opinion, a progress in Turkey and Italy bilateral relations when it comes to defense industry? There is already the interest by Italy in Turkish drones, whether it will materialize, and what is the likelihood of Turkey purchasing CeSPI air defense system, French-Italian air defense system, maybe in return for a procurement of Turkish drone by Italy?
Yes, thank you, Bilgehan. And actually, last Friday, we had the visit of the Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani to the Turkish counterpart Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, and on the table there was this SAMT issue as well. So apparently the negotiation is still going on, and likely they will finalize soon. Of course, we need to take into account the French position, because we know that the SAMT is a sort of consortium made by Turkey, Italy, and French. But what is clear nowadays that Turkey for Italy is a very valuable partner. They are facing the same challenges, and I would say the same opportunity as well in the region. It was made very clear, and I go back to what Murat said, that the need of cooperating strongly in Libya, for example, it was just included in the final statement of the visit. So I would say that despite the fact that there was some concern about the newly elected government in Italy, which is a sort of far-right government, the ties between Rome and Ankara are strong, and they will increase, I think, also related to the defense system and defense procurement as well. So I do not see any margin of frictions in this.
Thank you. Also, if I may direct another question, if you still have time, there is another one. You mentioned Turkey's increased importance when it comes to the dynamics within the framework of the war in Ukraine, like energy crisis, and also the diplomatic role played by Turkey. So do you see any impact of this increased role to have a spillover effect on the overall bilateral relation between Turkey and European Union? Do you see any impact of these increased importance to impact positively Turkish-EU relations, and intangible terms, of course?
Yeah, I think informally everybody acknowledges the role of Turkey, the increasing, I would say, the crucial role of Turkey in the conflict. But I think the real outcome, for the real outcome, we need to wait until the end of the conflict, inshallah, very soon, because it will be the time when, in one side, European Union has to start a very genuine brainstorming on what kind of actor it is, and also if it's able to develop the so-called defense union, I mean, within European countries, and what kind of role we should grant to Turkey, that actually has been playing a vital role in the conflict as well, overall, by arming the Ukrainian side. And on the other side, also, Ankara is called to make a sort of brainstorming on what kind of role wants to play related to European Union as well, because we know that there are some frictions and mutual distrust, I would say. So I do believe that there are margins of cooperation, but I do believe that it's time to, overall, for the European Union to put the mask on, out, and start really to understand what kind of union is this one. Politically, we reached a certain point, but then if we wanted to enlarge the scope of European Union, what it will be according to defense, and what will be the role of Turkey as well.
Thank you, Valeria. There is a question. Okay, you're running off. Okay. You can.
No, if there is another question, yes, of course you can address.
We have many questions, but because of the time limitations, I won't be able to ask all of them. So if you need to, leave, you can leave. We will continue with other speakers with other questions.
Okay, thank you so much. I have to catch a train, so I think I will leave in a while. Thank you, and congratulations again for the event.
Thank you very much. And there is a question, actually more than one question to you, both Sami and Murat Aslan. I will start with Sami. Sami, although you already answered to some extent to this, but there is a question asking to you, since there were two blocks, geopolitical blocks, until recently in the region. Now all of a sudden these blocks dissolved. Why is that particular reason for the solution of these blocks, and why every single country decided to go its own way?
I think the answer is relatively simple. I think the blocks formed as a result of a major event that took place in the region, which was the Arab Spring. As a result, every nation chose one of two camps. Either they supported the Arab Spring, or either they stood against the Arab Spring. Either they supported the democratic transitions and the idea of Arab populations democratically electing their leaders, or either they sought to preserve the authoritarian regimes in the region for the sake of preserving a status quo. And this is what resulted in the emergence of the blocks, in that Qatar and Turkey decided to support the democratic transitions in the region, decided to support the popular will of the Arab people whenever there were elections, and the elections were decided in favor of, quite frankly, the Muslim Brotherhood, were the parties, or it's more accurate to say Islamic-leaning parties dominated everywhere. In Tunisia, Ennahda came first and Arida Sha'biya came third, forming by themselves. They could have formed a majority in parliament. In Egypt, it was not just the Muslim Brotherhood, it was Hizb al-Nur al-Salafi as well. In Libya, although the Islamists officially came second, if you count the 75 independents, the overwhelming majority were Islamists. But the point here being is that Turkey decided to say that we welcome the democratic transitions, we support democracy in the region. Qatar said we're willing to support it. It could have been because their allies were the ones who were winning the elections, but that's not important. And on the other block were those who suggested that we do not want this Arab Spring to happen because it's getting too close to our borders. It might bring chaos and disaster here. The reason these blocks are now breaking apart is because there is no Arab Spring, or there is no threat in the manner that the Arab Spring represented between 2011 and 2014 and 2015, all the way through the last decade. And as a result, the imminence of that threat is no longer there. And this is what I mean when I say that for the UAE or for Turkey, when they're reconciling, the UAE is calculating and saying, look, where is the threat? Am I under imminent threat? No, I'm not under imminent threat over the Arab Spring. Let me explore the option of cooperation with Turkey. And Turkey is saying, look, even if I work with the UAE, I'm not going to have to give up anything that I got in Libya. I don't have to give up anything I got in Syria or anything. There's nothing that I practically lose in talking to the UAE. And this is why I think that the blocks are starting to break apart as countries are now reacting to new threats, new crises, new environments, and essentially moving on from the threat of, I say it's a threat even though I supported it, but moving on from the age of the Arab Spring, even if I don't believe it's entirely dead.
Thank you very much, Sami. And I will conclude, I believe, with the last question to Murat Aslan, which is about the prospect of both Greece and Turkey procuring different aerial assets from the United States. Namely, Greece will receive F-35 jet, but Turkey is probably is going to procure F-16 fighter jet. So what will be the impact of this, the imbalance, strategic imbalance between the two countries, and what will its impact be on the balance in the Eastern Mediterranean and Aegean Sea?
Well, in the eyes of the US decision makers, it's clear that they offer that advantage to Greek side because it's a 5th generation aircraft and they will be able to penetrate to the territory of Turkey. And in case they are engaging, well, they will have advantage. That's crystal clear. On the other hand, there are also some disadvantages of this purchase because Greek will be dependent on the US approval on every single decision if they want to exploit these aircrafts, because when you touch the panel, you must have the approval of the center situated in the United States. And there's another issue should be reviewed by the Greeks. There was a YouTube video. I mean, it was really interesting. The cost of this aircraft is like $1.7 trillion for the US, though they had invested only 400 billion. That means the rest is for maintenance and having this fleet, operational. So it will be a huge burden on Greek budget. This is another thing. But Turkey's strategy is a bit different because Turkey is expelled from the F-35 program, not only to stop the procurement of F-35, but Turkey was a partner in this company. I mean, Turkey invested in this business. So it was something, a matter of dispute in the frame of commercial law, even though the contract clearly stops applying to a code, but a bilateral negotiation with the company. On the other hand, if you go and check the military advantages and disadvantages, F-16 is just to fill the gap of Turkish Air Force up until 2030. That means for 7 to 8 years. Right after that, Turkey will start manufacturing 5th generation national war aircraft, MMU or TFX. And I believe that on March 18th, Turkish aviation industry will introduce the aircraft to the people, and the aircraft will take off maybe in the coming months or year. What does that mean? Turkey obtained the technology right now and started improving it. So Turkey does not need F-35. This is a clear fact, but it will be something like 5 to 7 years to manage the process. But politically, it's something that the US ignored balance between the two countries. It's another thing should be reviewed and concerned. I do not know if they will mend it, but once they deliver F-35 to Greece, that means it's a clear challenge to the alliance, because once something happens at the north or in the east, Iran, for instance, Turkey needs modern aircrafts at least up until 2030.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I have there are more questions to be addressed, but we already ran out of our time. Thank you very much. Although Valeria is gone, I would like to thank her to Sami, Hamdi, Editor-in-Chief of the International Interest, Dr. Murat, Aslan, Kalyoncu University Assistant Professor and SETA Foundation Foreign Policy Researcher. Thank you very much for your analysis. It has been a really informative and lively debate. And I would like to also thank all of our viewers for their time and interest. We try to shed some light on which are the dynamics that are shaping Turkey's geopolitical landscape, both in 2002 to 2022, and also its likely impact in 2023. And I would like to thank again all of our viewers, and hoping to meet the viewers and also fellow speakers in the next occasions. Till next time, goodbye.